Nearly a year after Wolfenstein The New Order was released, Wolfenstein The Old Blood arrives as a downloadable campaign at a low price. The experience it offers isn't as fresh or daring as The New Order was, but it is a strong follow-up, even if it doesn't do much to distinguish itself from the game it's based on. Set in the year 1946, B.J. Blazkowicz is tasked with infiltrating Castle Wolfenstein to find a folder containing information that will lead the Allies to the hidden fortress of the series' most persistent villain, the Nazi general and mad scientist, Death's Head. And while the story does open up and take some twists, you never lose sight of the goal of finding that intel. While not as emotional and thought-provoking as The New Order, The Old Blood is certainly more cohesive as a result of this tighter focus. The tone of the game is a shade lighter this time around, with more humor mixed in with the bloodshed, which helps because many of the characters you meet just aren't very memorable or interesting, and most of the attempts at poignancy fall flat, so the laughs help keep it from getting stale. Worthy of special mention, however, is the game's main antagonist, Helga von Schabs. Damaged, ambitious, intelligent, and intense, she's a very complex character. Death's Head was an incredibly ominous presence who exuded a sort of Sauron-like evil that could add a sense of dread to a scene just by his mention or indirect involvement, even in this game. Helga, by contrast, comes off as very human. You're given a lot of her history and insights, and so you're able to understand her motivations and her passion. As far as Wolfenstein villains go, she's a pretty tragic character, and in her own way, she's just as compelling as Death's Head. Gameplay is fundamentally unchanged, although encounters are more difficult and frantic as a result of more dense enemy population and the more complicated environments these fights take place in. This may be a gripe for many, but as someone who completed and loved The New Order, I appreciate that the developers respected me enough to graduate me on to a more difficult game. And I feel that if the difficulty of The Old Blood had simply been on par with The New Order, I wouldn't have found it as thrilling. Some new weapons are introduced, including a pipe you can use to pry open doors and climb up certain walls, but all this really does is tack on a few more button presses to environment traversal, and it doesn't really add anything to the game. Additionally, the pipe is your default weapon for stealth kills, which makes sense when you first get it, but by the time you find actual knives, it just feels weird. You can still use the knife for stealth takedowns by manually equipping it, but it doesn't make sense to me to sneak up behind a Nazi with my pistol out, and then when I hit the prompt for a stealth kill, he pulls out a pipe, even though at this point in the game I have a knife. The game is a refinement of the elements the series is known for, whereas The New Order was a progressive step. The New Order gave us a new and different Wolfenstein than what came before, but The Old Blood is just another instance of Wolfenstein with modern graphics, essentially just doing what Return to Castle Wolfenstein did in the early 2000s. At times, the sense of déjà vu will make you wonder what the point was, but the exhilarating gameplay is a pleasure that doesn't need justification. While not a must-play title this time around, anyone looking for an affordable slice of well-crafted first-person action could certainly do a lot worse than Wolfenstein The Old Blood.
Like, subscribe.